who found yourself in a relationship with somebody that's dangerous or predatory or narcissistic or psychopathic, and you found it terribly difficult to break free? Maybe you wore out your friendships. People got weary of hearing you talk about the same situation, the same story. Maybe you even got weary of yourself. You wondered what's wrong with you. I know I got to that place where I felt like I was the most pathetic person in the world. I didn't know why I couldn't leave. I didn't know what was going on with me. Well, I was talking to someone just recently who was trapped in a relationship, been in this relationship for a long period of time. And they're very aware that it's abusive and that they probably should leave, but they're struggling to get out. So what I have noticed is this. There seems to be two groups of people, and I want to address this today about why there seems to be this big chasm, this big gap. There's the group of the victims who are in the relationship who can't seem to leave. And I want to talk about what's going on with them and their mindset and why that's the way that it is. But then there's the other group of people who may be the observers. Maybe they're the friends and families. Maybe they're the people on social media. But there's the second group who has some sense of watching. They're watching this drama play out, and they're irritable. And they say things like, just leave. Or you obviously are a pretty sick person because you're not taking action to protect yourself. So you feel this frustration and judgment from the second group for the first group. So why are there two big categories of people? Why this two very divergent views of the same situation? I know me as a victim, it's very easy for me to think that if the people who say that found themselves in this situation, that they would find it no easier to get out of than I found it to be. But maybe they may never have that experience, and they might not know what it feels like to be on the inside of the relationship. But I thought it would be interesting to talk about the theories, why we have different perspectives of this, and I want to come at it from a couple of angles. The first is I want to come from the standpoint of we know what we know, and we only know that, and we use that viewpoint as a way to apply our understanding of the world. What I found as I was, by the way, I'm a psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. And when I was going through graduate school, they talked about how language, one of the first things an infant begins to learn is language, because that's the way we communicate. It's also a way that we decode the world. We put meaning to what we experience. So if you have something that hurts and a caretaker tells you or caregiver tells you, oh, that's pain, does your knee hurt? You learn, oh, that's my knee. And the feeling I'm having is pain. You begin to completely make sense of your world. You taste something wonderful and they say, oh, it's sweet. Do you like that candy? They put words to your experience, and that begins to be how you see the world. So for example, if you grew up in a part of the world where it doesn't snow, and you for the first time see snow, you're going to think when you know the word snow, but you don't know anything else. You just know the word snow. You're going to say, oh, this is snow. It's wet. It's cold. It melts on my skin, comes out of the sky. You're going to see snow. But if you grew up in the Arctic area, maybe you grew up in one of the kind of indigenous populations who have to cope with snow for great periods of time, they have various words for snow. In fact, I've heard there's upwards to 17 different ways to describe snow. Now, I grew up in Michigan. I don't have 17 words for snow, but I do know that there's dry snow, there's wet, slushy snow. I mean, I don't have 17 different words, but we certainly had ways that we described snow, so that to me, it's just not snow. We would say, oh, it's a real wet snow today, and I was like, oh yeah, it means it's near thawing, and it's going to be heavy, and if I have to go shovel, it's going to really hurt my back. But if it's cold and windy and it's like sub-zero, that's going to be a very dry snow and it's going to drift a lot. Then I know, oh, I better get home because it's going to start to drift and the roads are going to get bad. So you learn the words that you grow up with, or the words that you hear when you're learning words, begin to define the world as you see it. So if you're in a world with lots of different types of snow and they use these words, you're going to see snow from that perspective. It's going to tell you information. So if a word doesn't exist for you, it's literally not part of the lexicon of that language, then you're not going to be able to actually even know what that concept is. Now, here's a fascinating one that really blew my mind. I lived in Mexico for 2 years. I know some Spanish. Solamente más o menos, a little bit, un poquito. I'm not super good at it, but I know enough that I can maybe manage a little bit of getting around things there. So I was seeing a trained psychologist, actually, had a PhD, and who knew English, had a very good command of English. In fact, she trained in Canada, so her graduate training was in North America, and she was very, very solid in her understanding of English. So I said to her, because I was learning the Mexican way of saying how you felt. You know, if you're upset about, or you feel a lot of emotion, you say, muy emocionada. I'm very emotional would be how you say, I'm very excited. Or if you want to say to tell someone to relax or it's going to be okay, you'd say, tranquilo, it's going to be okay, calm down, calm down. So I was learning these words for how to describe kind of emotional context in Spanish. And I said to her, so what word in Spanish or in English does not exist in Spanish? Is there a word, an emotional word that does not exist in Spanish? And she thought about it and she said, yeah, I know of a word that doesn't exist in Spanish that exists in English. She says, accountability. What? She said, yeah, accountability doesn't exist. And somebody else that's a native speaker was there, and this person paused and thought and said, well, what about responsibility? That's the Spanish word. And she goes, yeah, but it's not really the same as accountability, because that has to do with integrity, a sense of like being accountable, held responsible for what you do to someone else, for other people. So it's not really capturing accountability because there's more dynamics than just that. And this person thought, he goes, you're right, that doesn't really capture. And I've tested this. I've gone down and asked other bilingual people about that, and they're like blown away. They're like, you're right. There's no Spanish word for accountability. But think about what that means. So if you're trying to set up an AA program and you want to build in a mentorship and you want mentors to help hold people who are struggling accountable, and there's not the word for accountability, you're going to have a hard time having them know how to really step in and operate that way for a person. So literally, they're not going to have the language to understand this concept because it's not in their lexicon any more than if I had some made up word for snow that meant this snow was like super dry, very sticky, and maybe even dangerous. And if I said that to you, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no concept of that. So when we're talking about victims, and we're talking about what happens to victims' mentality, the inside experience of what it's like when we begin to go through abuse, some of us have grown up in situations in which we're very self-protective. I'm thinking of, for example, attachment theory. There's the perspective of some of us have a secure attachment, that we feel confident, we can go out and take risks, we can ask for what we need. We know people in our world's not going to go away or go anywhere on us. That's a secure attachment. Unfortunately, not a lot of us grew up with that, but hopefully we can learn to do that. But more likely we're fitting into one of other two categories. There's actually three others, but a lot of us are anxious attachment. And in those individuals, relationships are risky and we do a lot of work. We're used to kind of pleasing people and showing up and really going above and beyond in order to keep them happy, to keep them in our life, because we're used to abandonment. We're used to losing relationships. So when people kind of go quiet or disappear on us, we have to work harder. Or we're avoidant. We're used to people being too intense and showing up too much, taking away from our control. We feel overwhelmed by their agenda and we lose track of ourselves. So we tend to like push back and we try to manage their intensity and keep them out of our lives. We're rather avoidant. We withdraw more. So when we have these different viewpoints and we have different boundaries, so an anxious attachment person's boundaries is going to be really fluid. They're going to put up with more. They're going to be more tolerant of things. They're going to probably do more work. Most of us would say a little bit of people pleasing. I think it's kind of unfair to apply that, but it may look that way. Whereas the avoidant person is going to be more rigid boundaries, and they're going to be less pursuing. They're going to put less energy into a relationship. They're going to disappear faster. So when you think again about abuse and language and the way we see things, if you're a person who sets boundaries really well and you don't have a problem with cutting people loose and you're very used to being on your own and independent, and you see someone who's struggling and who's captivated in this relationship and doesn't know how to get help, you're going to be blind to their situation and not be supportive. You're going to be critical of it and feel that they should see things the way that you see it without realizing that they don't have the worldview that you do. But if you're one of these individuals trapped in these relationships, and you know your reality, and you know what you've been living with that most people have no idea, and that's the thing that I found the most challenging about when I was in an abusive situation, is that the experience that I had was completely not imaginable. And I'd spent all of my adult life, because I got right in from 18, I started college and learning psychology. I worked all the way through to get my PhD by 28, and I started practicing and seeing clients at 28. I'd spent my entire life trying to make sense of human nature, and I'm now in a relationship as a 50-something-year-old, and it exceeds my experience, my understanding. In fact, I had a specialty in domestic violence. I worked with runaway teens when I was back, a 20-something-year-old. I had all these experiences with working with this population without understanding what this population was going through, which for me, even saying that I'm humbled. I'll tell you, it's embarrassing. So here I am, I'm in an abusive relationship and I can't get out, and I feel completely crazy. And I don't know what's going on, except that what I do know is going on feels very, very unsafe. And whatever I do is going to be a mistake. I can't get out well. There's no getting out of this relationship. In fact, one reason you stay is because at least the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. So you know the rules of what it looks like to stay. But if you leave, man, this person's going to make it painful. They're going to really hurt you and hurt you good. So it's just easier to do nothing. It's just easy. But the rest of the world who's not experienced this has a blindness, and they don't see that. They haven't experienced it. They don't know what it's like on the inside. And so as a result, their advice is often, not, at the least, it's ignorant advice. And at the worst, it augments, it worsens the abuse. We feel abused not only by the abuser, but we end up feeling abused by the public. So the other problem going on that makes this super tricky is that for the victim, they're experiencing what's called cognitive dissonance. Now, what is that? And by the way, I have really made this a big study of mine, because when I was going through it, I really wanted to understand why there was moments where I couldn't even speak. I literally was mute. I had selective mutism. I couldn't operate on my best interest. I had a PhD, guys. I used to take on clients in the office. It wasn't like I didn't know how to be able to sort of like handle difficult people, but why wasn't I able to handle this situation? Yes, I wanted this person's approval, and yes, I wanted their love, but there was something else going on that just was mind-boggling. What's interesting is that cognitive dissonance has been around for forever, and we're just now researching it. It's one of the hottest topics in sociology we're trying to study and understand, because what they're discovering is that chronic experience of cognitive dissonance causes brain damage. Yeah, you heard me correct. It causes brain damage. So what's happening to the victims when they begin to experience this chronically, their level of functioning begins to deteriorate. So your forgetfulness, disorganization, the way that you're struggling to find words, how vigilant you feel, your inability to sleep, that's all real. It's based on what's happening to your brain, and it's being changed. The experience is changing it. So what is cognitive dissonance? Let's back up and talk about it, because it's something that happens to all of us all the time. You don't even notice it when it's happening. It's when you experience two opposing beliefs and you have to make a decision. So here's a good example. You are on a budget and you're coming to the end of the month and your account's getting low. So you know that you need to be careful because you need to make it the last few days, and maybe you won't even have enough gas. So you want to save that last few dollars in order to get to the end of the month. But you spot a shirt or a blouse that you need, and it's on sale, but it's going to eat up the rest of the money and you won't have the money you need for gas. And you don't know how long the sale's going to last. And you go and you talk to the salesman and they say it's the last one they have in stock of that size. So if you wait a week, you may not be able to get it for this price and it may not even be available. So what do? That moment of that indecisiveness, that pain that you feel, that's cognitive dissonance. So you make a decision, and yes, some of you are already telling me what decision you'd make. You make a decision, and the minute you make the decision, you've solved the cognitive dissonance. You make some explanation to yourself. Either if you decide to buy it, you justify it some way. You say, well, I'll borrow some money from my friend, and that'll tide me over the gas because I'll save money by you say something to yourself that justifies why you decided what you decided. If you decided to wait, you tell yourself you'll find something else that will work. I mean, you say something, you make some solution that sort of gets you through it so that you can feel okay about your decision. So the problem that happens with abuse is the cognitive dissonance is about your partner or about the situation. So in the beginning, in fact, there's 3 stages of it. In the beginning, you find out something shocking that you didn't know about this person, that like maybe, they lied or there's something going on you had no idea. Or now you're seeing a side of them that you didn't know existed. You didn't know that you'd been love bombed. You thought you really met the real person. And now you're discovering you don't know them the way you think you know them. So the big first cognitive dissonant question you ask yourself is, who is this person? Are they good or bad? And who did I get into a relationship with? So there's where your first set of like big stopping moment. And you can't decide because they seem to be both. They go back and they treat you the way that you were when you first met them. And then they have another bad moment or another big blow up and you see the other side. So you see both sides and you're living in this waffling between both sides and you can't tell what's real. Or maybe you did catch them on something bad and then they tell you, with a really big tears that they're working so hard and they've never worked harder and they want this, you're the best thing they've ever found and, all of this stuff. And you're caught because you think, well, what kind of person am I? Am I going to walk out on somebody? I don't want to walk out on just somebody who needs me, someone who's changing. By the interesting, we just took a poll. Do you find it easy to leave a narcissist? And 80% of you said, I struggled immensely. Nobody said they didn't struggle. Nobody said this was an easy decision. It was a difficult decision for everybody. And 20% of you are still trying to leave right now. So that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing your information on that. I appreciate that. So you're waffling on that about who is this person. And then it doesn't get better. It keeps getting worse. So then the next stage of cognitive dissonance is you start to ask yourself, is this relationship worth saving? Is it salvageable? I don't know. And you kind of waffle back and forth. You see moments of give you hope. I know mine said he was going to therapy. My therapist thought it sounded like he was working. I was getting input that looked like he was working. He said some of the right things, and then there would be another really bad thing, and then there would be another, it was back and forth on this. So that's the second stage. And then the third stage of cognitive dissonance is you begin to think what's wrong with you. You're not making any decisions to take care of yourself. It feels utterly crazy making. This is not who you've been. This has not been your track record. You don't behave like this, and you're still here. And you wonder what's wrong with you. So you can see the levels of cognitive dissonance are worsening. It's, I don't know who my partner is. I don't know what's going on, or to my friend or my loved one is. Why am I still in a relationship with this person? I don't know why. Should I not? And then you begin to think, what's wrong with me because I'm still staying in a relationship with them? You can see how there's decline. But that chronic state of stress and indecisiveness, because remember, cognitive dissonance is just about a decision. It's about a momentary decision that we make, decide, move on. But when we stay in this, and I remember it was like the last thing on my mind when I went to bed. It was the first thing on my mind when I woke up, and I would watch all day long. I would watch for evidence of, do I lean this way, or do I lean this way, or I lean this way, or I lean this way. I would and some of us stay there for years. And meanwhile, But the stress of this is causing deterioration to our brain, causing loss. So back to where I started about why do people say to just leave? I think because they don't understand what we're going through. It's inconceivable. I think because they've not experienced this chronic cognitive dissonance. Because they don't understand that we are now becoming damaged by the abuse. In fact, it's now being theorized, and I think this is fascinating. The big question has been, what's the worst kind of abuse? Even that question to me is stupid. It's kind of like an insulting question. We shouldn't be asking what kind of abuse is the worst abuse, because all abuse is inappropriate. But interestingly, we do ask that. And what they've been finding is the worst kind of abuse they're discovering is narcissistic abuse. Why? Because it erodes your sense of self, it chips away your confidence, it demolishes you as a person, and it damages your brain. It has incredible ramifications. I'm not saying it's okay to sexually offend somebody. I'm not saying it's okay to beat up somebody, that these things are better, because like I said, I think even the question's a ridiculous question. But I want you to, but the bias has been because it's invisible, because it happens to the person's emotions and self, therefore it's less hurtful. The reality is it's not less hurtful. It is just as damaging, maybe even more damaging, because it's damaged something about our sense of self. I'll tell you, now who I am today, I really like who I am. It's pretty powerful. I'm confident. I'm doing things I never thought I would do. But the person that I was before I got into that relationship, she died. I could feel her dying. She doesn't exist anymore. My naivete, my innocent view of the world, my belief that everybody are basically well-meaning, my level of trust that I have, that got demolished. And will it come back? Well, it's different. It's come back, but it's different. So I'm starting this new policy of I'm going to talk for the first 20, 30 minutes. So that's my big spiel today that I wanted to start this off to kick our discussion. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm going to now turn it over to you to talk about the questions that you guys have for me. I'm on both Instagram and TikTok live at the same time. I'm watching the feed for both of you. So I would love to hear, how are you doing today? How are you doing around this topic? How are you doing with recovery? I also want to talk about some resources. I already know one of the big questions that have come in that probably many of you are echoing is can we recover? If we've found ourselves in an abusive relationship, is there hope for healing? So I want to definitely talk about that because I think it's so, so important. Also, please, for my sake, so I can know that you're talking to me, please put a thumbs up in front of the question. And let me introduce myself to you. For those of you new to my platform, I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy. I am a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. I'm also a trauma and narcissistic abuse survivor. Recently, after all that work as a therapist, I ended up in an abusive relationship after I closed my practice. So it was a recent thing that I'm healing from now. So you're seeing me 3 years out. That's when I left the relationship, was 3 years ago. My divorce was final 3 years in September. Yahoo! So, and this is where I'm at today. I'm able to, by the way, navigate 2 streams of comments and talk to you and keep my mind on the topic. So it tells you that I've done a lot of healing from the cognitive dissonance. I've experienced a lot of healing. There are still some symptoms I'm struggling with. It's more for me because I'm a chronic trauma survivor. I have more problems with hypervigilance and an overactive nervous system. So I struggle with sleep is a big issue. I really have severe insomnia. That's a common thing I struggle with. So I do still see some kind of hangover from it, but I'm working actively. In fact, I've hired a trauma-informed fitness coach who's kind of helping me with my whole lifestyle for me to be able to sort of get myself back in line and treat myself kinder, catch where I'm perpetuating the abuse and neglect of myself, because that's one thing we often do is we get used to the neglectful behaviors, neglectful lifestyle, and then we perpetuate it ourselves without even knowing that we're doing that. So I've got somebody who's holding me accountable so that I can do better at those realms. So what are your questions are for me? I know somebody's talking about the vagus nerve. Honestly, I have to say to you guys, it's a newer area of psychology, and I graduated way back. So I need to be updated on it. I want to do some reading on it. I know it's really important. I know it's a hot topic that they're talking a lot about. I think it's very involved with trauma, very connected. So I definitely would like to learn more about that. So I can't speak to that question that keeps being asked. So I'm sorry about that, but I will come back to it. I hope you come back to one of my other lives, and I'd be happy to address it. Also know that I do have subscribers. Actually, I found out how to tell if you're a subscriber on Instagram too, guys, because I have subscriptions over there. One of the benefits of subscriptions is that your questions come to the top and are first. So if I see that on TikTok, if it says heal, and on Instagram, it's a little badge. If I see that, then that comes up, and then I will, your question comes up over top of everybody else. And I do a subscription live only once a month. So my November one will be coming up soon. So how did I heal? Kitten wants to know, how did I heal? She has all those symptoms. Well, the first thing is you have to get out of the relationship. You have to stop the abuse. What I discovered, it wasn't just that one person was abusive. I discovered I had surrounded myself with abusive people. I didn't know that. I didn't know that abuse had gotten so normal for me that when I took a look at all my relationships, my friendships, that a lot of them were abusive. So I had to basically clean house on all my relationships. So watch for that. We tell people, go no contact with the abuser, but have we challenged you to really look at your social support system to evaluate its healthiness as well? I found out mine was not healthy. So I had to literally go to basically no one for a period of time and begin to start over, which I know that's hard, and that's one reason we stay and why we put up with it, because we end up feeling like something bad is better than nothing than all. I know it doesn't make any logical sense, but that's the way our mind works. But so that's the first thing, is you got to get out of the abuse. And you have to also have nothing in your life that's stimulating you and reminding you of the abuse, which is why we really urge no contact. It's not for the abuser. Yeah, it's for the sense of we don't want them bothering you. And if they're not in your life, that reduces that possibility. But it's really more for you. It's way more for you, because even if you're like me, anything that like you stumble across and you see their name, or you see an image, or even that damn like photo reminder memories out of I had to stop that too on my phone and Facebook. You know, both of them likes to like, do you remember what you were doing 4 years ago? You got to turn it off. You need to have all of that stop. You need to not be being triggered as much as you can. So you have to like get into a quiet period where you're really calming down and having a quieter environment. And then you have to begin to look at your lifestyle. Where are you actually neglecting or abusing yourself? Are you eating regularly? Are you getting the exercise? Are you even using the restroom when you need to? Are you making yourself wait? Are you having good like nighttime care? Are you paying attention to your phone usage so that you're not overly like too much light in your eyes too late? I mean, you got to really pay attention to all of those things and begin to be more actively careful with yourself. Then it's very helpful to get coaching, being a part of a support group where you can talk about it freely, where you have permission to share what's going on with you or the areas you're struggling and feel no shame. That's so important. If you don't have a place, one of the things that I offer is a premium support group called Toxic Free Relationship Club, where you can go and just be yourself. So it's really important to have effective support. And then it's helpful also often to get therapy, to do something with a mind-body connection. Those are very, very important, mind-body connection. I know most of therapies like CBT, all of that's good, but it's talk therapy. And the problem with talk therapy, it's all in your head and it's logical. You need something that connects you both, your body back with your mind. So there are new treatments that are coming out that are very helpful. Again, they're kind of newer, so I'm a little less familiar with them, but I know there's like yoga body therapy. There's some massage therapy that's really helpful. You can get into art therapy, music therapy. EMDR is really useful. So I'm not saying don't get talk therapy. I'm not saying that, but you might want to also add to it other types that help you to connect with your body and get you back in touch. All of that is very, very helpful, but it takes time. That's the hard part that we struggle with, is that it's not an immediate result, but we can heal. Your brain is what's called plastic, meaning that it does we used to think that whenever a neuron died that it was, or a neuron was damaged, it never regrew. Well, we now know that it does. It just is so much slower than other cells in the body, probably for good reasons. So it takes time, takes a lot of time. I'm going to hop over to Instagram and take one of their questions over there. Ducky wants to know, should we take breaks from consuming narcissistic abuse recovery content? I find myself growing increasingly hypervigilant, and I begin to obsess about protecting myself that I don't want to let anyone in. Ducky, that's interesting that you're saying that. I wonder what kind of content that you're participating in. Because like, for example, is this making you feel more anxious listening to this? I would hope not. I'm not talking about abusive stuff. I'm talking about healing from abuse or thoughts about abuse. But if it for you, obviously, I mean, if we're talking about healing from cognitive dissonance and you're finding this is a triggering content, then certainly you need to respect that it's triggering for you. I'm not for sure that would be something I would say is a rule for everybody, but because I think all of us are in different stages needing different things. So it's important that you pay attention to your process and take care of that so that's good for you. So here's another common question that came in, and I know I'm way behind, guys. So I'm like over 100 questions behind you or comments behind you. But Melly Dinamante wants to know, I put an end to a relationship. I feel very guilty because I was with him for 9 years, or with her, or whomever, with this person for 9 years. That's a common experience, guys. That's very, very common. One of the things that happens really early on in an abusive relationship, and it happens also just in unhealthy relationships. It's not only with abusive relationships, but really watch out for this. This is a sign of emotional immaturity. It's really, actually, that's a good way to put it. It's a sign of emotional immaturity. And that is when you find somebody who makes you responsible for their emotional well-being. Like they say to you, when you talk about that, you're upsetting me, so don't talk about that. Or I just don't want to talk about these topics. Or I won't watch these shows. They somehow like affect your life and make your life, you responsible for their well-being. And you'll see it happen right away. It's even in a hug. Pay attention to this in a hug. This comes out of David Schnarf's book, The Passionate Marriage. And if anybody's around me for very long, you know how much I love his stuff. He writes about this. Pay attention the next time you hug somebody. Who's leaning into whom? Are you carrying the other person's weight, or are they carrying your weight? Right there. You both have 2 feet. You both know how to stand up. Neither one of you are handicapped. Why is one of you leaning into the other one of you? And chances are the one who's doing the leaning, you also that person leans into the other person for other things too. It's a sign of how you're handling the relationship, the emotional piece of the relationship. You will physically show that process in the hug, is the leaning. So try this experiment in the hug. Let's stay in the hug for a moment, because some of you guys are talking about interestingly for me, my late husband, he leaned into me. So I carried a lot of weight from the relationship. I did. It was exhausting for me. But I know a lot of us also lean into our partners. So I'm not saying it goes both directions. But here's what Dr. Schnarf said to do as a way to manage that. In that hug, when you start to feel that weight, your weight moving into the other person or their weight falling onto you, shuffle your feet, throw everybody off balance for a second by just moving, which is what you'll do. If you move restlessly, you'll shuffle the weight. And then hold yourself back up so that you don't take that person's weight, or hold yourself back up so that you don't give that person the weight. And then see what that feels like. See how comfortable that feels. And the leaning starts to happen again, shuffle again and do it again. But try that, but also here's another way to do in a relationship when it comes up with something happens. Because chances are, let's say that you're the person who lets people lean on you. So if somebody comes to you with an issue and tells you a problem, I want you to do 2 things. One, I want you to stop saying, I'm sorry about that. You're not sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. It isn't even about you. So you're not sorry. So stop saying you're sorry. I no longer, if you guys communicate with me and you tell me something horrible, you watch my comments, you never say, here I say, I'm sorry. And by the way, I used to always say, I'm sorry. But sorry for what? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not responsible for what happened. I can feel bad about what happening to you without being responsible for it. So stop saying you're sorry. And the other thing is, I want you to no longer offer suggestions. I don't want you to give advice unless they directly say to you, what should I do? Or I'd like your help. Unless they say those things, don't offer a help. I want you instead to offer support, which, by the way, is just probably more important than the help. Probably more important than the help. I want you to say, that is gut-wrenching. How are you doing? Oh, I can't imagine that. You can find other things to say that's you, that feels very caring and loving and present without saying, I'm sorry, or trying to fix it. Don't try to fix it. Just that simple thing, you have in this relationship, this emotional context, you've shifted the weight and you stop taking on this person's weight. So yeah, it's interesting how that we do that. So back to the original comment, I feel guilty. It's been 9 years. What happens with narcissistic and sociopathic, but more narcissistic individuals, is that they want you responsible for what's happening in the relationship, because that then puts you under their control. Then they can blame everything on you. So it's actually even worse than our immature friends who do this, or immature family members. For them, they're doing this deliberately, because if you don't take responsibility, then that means they have to. And they don't want to, because they don't want to change. They don't intend to change, and they don't intend to be accountable for what's happening. They want to make you responsible for what's happening. So they shift the responsibility off of you, off of them onto you, and then make you feel bad. So the fact that she's saying, I feel guilty, means this person was very successful at doing this. So I would recommend that you remind yourself that you've never in any way made this person do what they did or made them treat you this way, and that this is a natural consequence of what happens to bad behavior. I know it's a lot, and you're going to have to keep saying it to yourself and keep saying it to yourself until it feels true. It won't feel true for a long time, but that's the way we begin to help change our thinking, is by telling ourselves the truth. Because here's the thing, I used to think this too. This is a common fallacy about emotions and thoughts and change. I used to spend all sorts of time with clients trying to help them have insight. If I figured if they understood why they did what they did, then they would do differently. Like it's your mother's fault, or it's because you had this bad childhood. I figured if we could somehow have this epiphany, then the light would come on and they would do different behavior. That's not true. It doesn't work that way. Spent a lot of time with clients trying to do that, and it doesn't work. So this is how it works. This is how change happens. It doesn't matter how you feel about what it is that you're doing. You don't have to like it or not like it. You don't even have to understand it. You don't need understanding. All you need to do is you start doing the new thing. And you just do it over and over and over and over. And you do it over enough, it becomes a habit, and it begins to do it. And then something incredible happens. Your feelings change in response to the new behavior. You want to do it down the road. So let's take exercise. You talked to me years ago, I would have told you I hated exercise. I hated how it made me feel. I hated how weak and, stupid I felt. I hated that I wasn't very coordinated, that I felt like I was I was embarrassing myself in a gym. I hated it. But I went anyway. I went every day anyway, and one thing that happens, you get better at it so you don't feel so awkward, and you start to know how to do stuff. All that starts to help. But I found I began to enjoy the experience of working out. I began to really enjoy what it felt like in my body to get sweaty and do all of that stuff. It just took enough practice, and then my feelings about it changed. So change doesn't happen out of our feelings. Feelings, I think of it like this. Think of a dog moving through a door with a head, body, and tail. The feelings is the tail. The head is the behavior. You lead with the behavior, and as you go through the door, the tail follows, the feelings follow. So you change your behavior, and over time, your feelings will catch up. That's how it actually works. So when it comes to this issue of you feeling guilty, you have to keep saying to yourself, you're not responsible. And stop taking responsibility for other people by watching what you say, watching what you do. Like, for example, if they make a bad decision or do something really stupid, don't rescue them from that. It's not your fault. You don't need to clean up the mess. Yeah, you may need to live around the mess that's uncomfortable, but you don't need to clean that up for them. And if you keep being very careful with your boundaries and what you will take responsibility for, and even watch what you say and how you say it, then you will begin to, your mindset will change in response, and you'll begin to feel differently about things. Yeah, my ex set the rules really fast when I met him. He told me I was thinking about that today, thinking about this topic. He told me right off the bat that he had been responsible for other people. He didn't intend to be responsible. He wanted to know if I would take responsibility. And then he tested me, whether or not I would do it. Of course I did, so that made me a really good candidate. So watch for that, because they're very sophisticated at making us respond. And the sob story that you hear, yes, it increases your suggestibility and trust for sure. That's intent, but it also creates a backstory so that whenever they do something wrong, they can say, I told you I was from a bad childhood. I told you I experienced that abuse. I told you, all of this stuff. And they're setting the baseline for the explanation. Mine early on said, I told you I had a sexual addiction problem. That's why I struggled to be monogamous. So yeah, it's a great way to offload. You don't have to change if you have a story that you can blame everything on. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to Instagram and take a question over there. The typical narcissist is childhood trauma, sexual abuse as a child. Do they ever love? Actually, Kat, that's actually a myth. Well, I'm sorry, it's not really a myth. It was a theory that was floated out there. Is the reason, so we're going to talk about why is there narcissism? Is it because of trauma? That's a common thing that we assume it's because of trauma. It actually, in fact, I was interviewed by Narc and Me with Ashley and talking to her about this. I'd sat through a webinar with Dr. Gregory Lester, and amazing guy. He was he's a researcher, clinician. He works with personality disorders for a very, very long time. He's successful. He has a successful practice with personality disorders. He learns how to do compensation. And I got to sit with him for 6+ hours, and he said outright, guys, that's not true. It is not due to generational or childhood trauma. It's not. There's been all sorts of research. It's been laid to rest. It's been research to suggest the question on that is closed. It is not that. It is not because of that. They've looked, because what you have to do when you research a problem is you have to compare groups. Like you have the group of people who have that trauma and history without the personality disorder. You have to compare it against the group who's the control group, and you got to compare it against the narcissist who also has that history and the narcissist that doesn't have. So you have to really do this very sophisticated design. And they've done those works, and they find that there's no correlation. That yes, there are personality disorders with traumatic histories for sure, and with families with traumatic histories. But there are also narcissists without trauma or family histories. And then you've got those who have family histories of trauma or trauma themselves who are not narcissistic. And then you see what I'm saying? You have all of that. And they've actually found that they don't correlate together. They tend to occur together. So what is it? Well, it's called a biosocial theory. That's what they're thinking at this moment. Strong genetic component. But it's not perfectly transmitted by genetics. So they find among twin studies about 66% of identical twins. If one twin has like a narcissism, the other twin's likely to have narcissism. It's higher if it's antisocial personality disorder. It's closer to 70%. But it's not a perfect transmission from genetics. But so there's some biosocial connection. Something kind of, maybe it's like an activation in childhood of some kind that changes their brain and it causes deficiencies. But there's been primed for it, and then there's something that happens environmentally, and it could just even be with, it could be just misparenting, or an experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be trauma. It could be just something, we're not exactly for sure why, but something kind of activates it and has as a problem. Here's the other thing is, narcissism, the reason it's not very changeable is because it's personality traits. This is hard wiring. It's like changing a motherboard on a computer. It's part of its guts, the makeup of a person. Same for victimology, and that's why I really hope that you guys come to the Sandra Brown's webinar on November 10th. We're going to find out that it is not because you guys are codependent or that I'm codependent. It's not because we have bad boundaries. We have 2 personality traits that increases our likelihood of being picked and groomed by predators. It's the very thing that has increased our success in life and makes us really high achieving and really great team members are the same qualities that make us susceptible and vulnerable to abuse. Sandra Brown calls these super traits. So we're going to be talking about that more in the upcoming webinar. What are super traits? How can we deal with these? Because they're part of who we are. It's not something you're going to change. You're going to always be this kind of a person. But how can you have these wonderful super traits, but be less vulnerable to people who are going to weaponize them against you? So that's what's going to be discussed in this upcoming webinar. I'm super excited about it. Sandra Brown, if you guys don't know her, she wrote 2 big books that's fascinating. One is How to Spot a Dangerous Man Before You Get Involved. And the second one she also talks about is why women who love psychopaths, women who love psychopaths. So it's going to be really, really interesting. She's worked with the psychopathic and narcissistic population for over 30 to 40 years. She's very familiar with that group and how they think. She's listened to them. So it's going to be really interesting to hear her take on what happens in this dynamic in this webinar. And I'm excited. Just be warned, even if you can't come, buy a ticket, because the replay will be more expensive after the fact. So if you want to save money and you think this is going to be something you want in your library, buy the ticket, and then after the event, I will be sending you out a free replay. But otherwise, the replay will be for sale, but at a higher cost than the ticket is at this moment. So thank you for that question, Kat. That was a great question. I'm going to come back and take a question off of TikTok. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. It's been really, really wonderful. I've been enjoying this thoroughly. And I appreciate my mods so much, so much. Make sure you put a thumbs up so I know you're talking to me. And you guys have done a lot of talking back and forth. So where's the last question? I'm going way back, guys. Way back. Well, 3 more have come in. Let's see if one of the questions are in there. You're just giving me thumbs up. I need a question, guys, not just a thumbs up. So what do you guys want to know? Okay, I'm going to jump over to, while you guys are thinking it on TikTok, I'm going to jump over to Instagram. Maybe there's a question over here. Well, Ducky, I'm glad you found my page too. I'm glad my page is not triggering you. I'm sorry to hear that you're being triggered by content. And by the way, Ducky, people who are in TikTok are saying that some of them are being triggered by content as well. I think it's important just to pay attention to that, you know? Find out I've never been a person particularly that stuff upsets me, but yeah. How many of you guys saw the ending of the Game of Thrones House of Dragons? Did you guys watch Sunday's episode? Man, I was choking, like hiccuping, sobbing from the ending of that. That was extremely triggering to me. So yes, it can happen, that's for sure. What doctor did I sit with? Michelle, can you say more what you're asking me? I am a doctor, by the way. So the question for me is kind of, you were talking about Dr. Gregory Lester. Dr. Lester, he was part of the DSM-5 personality committee group when they're rethinking how they're going to organize personality disorders in the DSM-5. He was a part of that, put his expertise to impact that. So he's amazing. I know he's not a mainstream writer, so you're not going to find his book out there. He tends to write research articles, so you're going to have to go find him like a Google Scholar is where you'd find his work. I can give you the references, but I'm thinking about approaching him for an upcoming webinar because he's an expert on personality disorders and he does work with them. That's actually the group he treats. And he's an educator of clinicians. So who he mostly speaks to is he does continuing education for psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists. So that's the realm he's well known in. He's not well known in more the public kind of pop psychology realm. But I've been thinking about whether or not to interview him and having a couple narcissists be a part of the panel and so that we have a representation of personality disorders who are in treatment, talking to a therapist who does treatment. I think to me, that would be fascinating. But a question for you guys, is that something you would like to see as a webinar? Would that be interesting to you to hear, how does narcissism, what's the root of it? How does it treat? Why are they so resistant to treatment? What's the risk factors around them? Getting treatment, that's what he would be able to address. So would you like that as a webinar? Or my other thoughts are, because I want to get people who are well-known or who are experts in their realm. And yes, I know you guys are going to say, tell me, please go talk to Dr. Ramani. I mean, I can make a pitch to her if I can get a hold of her. I may try to see her in person in Washington, D.C. in March. She's going to be doing training in March again. And I'm thinking seriously about going. Maybe I can try to catch her and talk to her and see if we can get her on. But that's a long shot. That's a long shot. So, I think it would be really, I think Dr. Lester is a strong possibility because I actually have his email, so I know how to get a hold of him. So I think that's more realistic. But I have a webinar planned in February that I've not announced that I'm super excited about, and it's a big name. So I will be announcing that as we approach Christmas. So it'll be one you can put on your calendar over February 9th. It's going to be a luncheon webinar. So I'm super, super excited. Can I speak more about attachment styles? Yeah, I can. My normal blood pressure is dangerously high when triggered. What's it due to exposure? Probably that's back to the vagal nerve, the vagus nerve that someone brought up earlier today that I need to do more research on. I know that it's involved with trauma, that it does impact us physiologically, has a lot of like impacts. So I need to do more research because, like I said earlier, that this is an area I'm a little more wobbly on. I'm not as well versed on it, so I don't want to speak to that yet. But yeah, a couple of you said you would like to hear from Dr. Lester, that you think that would be interesting. Dawn asked over Instagram, my kids are constantly triggering abuse by telling me things their father has done to disappoint them. How do I stop these from being triggers if they're my children who needs my support? Whoa, good question. Good question. You know, part of the thing that will happen is just the exposure. The continual exposure will reduce your sensitivity to it. It'll become, but part of what you're probably over identifying in a sense of you feel like this, they're your kids. So you have this connection. So they feel like an extension of you. I think what might help, Dawn, is to remind yourself as they're growing, and I know they're little and they're learning, so that they're growing. I know they're not where you'd like them to be, but for you to recognize that they need to learn this skill set on their own. That part of it is it's not your fault necessarily, and I'm going to say something hard. It's also not necessarily your responsibility to make it less painful. That's a hard statement I just said. I know, because the world will do hard things to them, and it will be their job to learn how to develop skills to cope with that. So part of what maybe might help you feel less triggered is for you to begin to teach them these skills. Like to say, wow, that sounds tough. So what did you do? How well did it work? What might you try the next time that happens with dad? You know, get them to think proactively, get them to think strategically about how to manage this emotionally for themselves, because their dad is not going anywhere in their life. He will be a father to them for the rest of their life, unfortunately. So that way you're actually teaching them skills by asking them these provocative questions. But yeah, it's gut-wrenching when this happens. I don't like it. In fact, that was what triggered me on the House of the Dragons, Game of Thrones, is the ending of it was an injury to a child that was horrific. I saw it coming. They did a great job with foreshadowing it coming. And with me, with my multiple losses, you know, my husband died. My first husband died of cancer. My oldest son nearly died several times from leukemia. He's now in remission. For me, the fact that death has been a big part of my life and close to me, for me to witness that on this show was, whew, I just told you what happened, but was horrific. It was very triggering for me. But we can help insulate our children by giving them skills and telling yourself that that's what you're doing. I know that that's not the same as you need to be present. I hear that. And you know that you need to be present because that's why you're framing the question the way you did. So I love the fact that you're saying, I want to be here emotionally for them. Yeah, it's hard work. And breathe while it's happening, breathe. Maybe after it's over, you can go journal and cry and go take a shower and sob in it. You know, I think there's ways you can release the emotions around the experience, but not during it. So, but great question. And it's painful. It's painful to hear this stuff. Yeah. Yeah, somebody was saying they lost so many of the family members from the abuse. And it's so painful. See, I want to say I'm sorry, but I'm not saying I'm sorry. I'm practicing my own medicine. I'm like, Carrie, you're not responsible for what happens to other people or what people do to them. Yes, I feel bad that it's happening to you guys. Why don't they ever own it up? Well, a narcissist or people who have personality disorders are hardwired to not be self-reflective or to have a lot of empathy. This is just part of their makeup. Their makeup is to excuse themselves, to see that the blame belongs to those around them, not to themselves. It's just part of the makeup. They just don't own it, partly because it then creates intense shame, and they're shame avoidant, a lot of them are, but it also just is, they're just not self-reflective. That's just part of the makeup, unfortunately. Can it be taught? No. Self-reflection is a very difficult thing to teach. It's actually a complex psychological task. Your ability to be self-reflective shows high sophisticated level of emotional maturity. It's not a very easy skill to learn. So some of this is learned. I'm very good. I'm almost excessively. And for me, it was part of my strategy to keep safe from abuse. So I've learned this kind of as a protection. But yeah. And I'm an INFJ. And I think intuitive people maybe are a little more wired that way, naturally. Hey, I'm so glad to see Mrs. I'm trying to think of how to say your name. Is it Gloria? I think is it Gloria? If I'm wrong, I'm so sorry. But I love your content so much. I watch you, and I think you're one of the super brave people on TikTok, and I appreciate that. Appreciate that so much. Yeah, there's a lot of INFJs. I know of another, I don't know. I know another creator. I don't want to out them. They may not want everyone to know, but I know that I've met that. I think a lot of us in this realm are INFJs, and I also wonder if INFJs are a little more vulnerable to getting pulled into abuse. I think that we are, because we're diplomats, which means we're advocates, which I think makes us kind of vulnerable. I'm going to take one last question today, and then I will jump off. Okay, that's a great one, Sugar Booger. I will take your question as the last one. Yeah, we are a rare group, but there's a lot of us in this rare group in this. So you want to know what is self-reflection? It's also called introspection. Self-reflection is, you first of all have to, I'm going to try to just see if I can describe it psychologically first. So you have to mentally see yourself as objectively. So as an outsider, you have to become an object to yourself so you can observe yourself. And then, so it's a splitting, something, it's not really splitting like what you use psychologically, but you have to have a separateness from yourself, detachment enough from yourself to witness yourself, watch your behavior, watch what you're doing. And then you have to have enough self-tolerance for pain to observe yourself realistically. It's like looking in the mirror accurately, like looking naked at yourself in the mirror. You have to have enough wherewithal to see yourself like that without wanting to turn away, which takes a lot of strength. It's uncomfortable. And then you have to be able to make observations of corrections that you would think you should make in order for it to improve. So you separate, observe, honestly, see errors, and then you adjust. Do you see how complicated that is? Why it would be hard for people who have fragile or brittle egos or selves? It's not, they don't know how to do that. A lot of us don't do it very well, but you don't want to do it too much. Because so if you stay up there and I call it living at the map level. If you witness yourself up in the map level, you're not living. It can almost become a form of dissociating. So watch out for that, because dissociation is similar, but different. But so you don't want to do that because it's disconnected from the experience too much. But it's very effective if you want to make adjustments, course corrections. If you want to analyze a setting of something, like say I get done with this live and I want to think about how it went. I can pause and do that replay it in my head, think about how all this felt, and then I can make adjustments for the next time so I can improve on the experience. So you can see how, like I said, with more brittle personalities that it would be tough to do, very, very tough to do. Yeah, Mocha Mama, that's a great question. She asked, is there a quiz to see if you're in an abusive relationship? Absolutely. It's on my website. If you go into the link in my bio, all of you, I have this free survey, guys, that lets you know if your partner is toxic, dangerous, or capable of change. That's really actually code for, I'm going to tell you what it's code for. Are you in a relationship with a narcissist, an antisocial personality disorder, or are you with somebody who's just emotionally immature? So I'm about ready to change that so that it's a little more of an opt-in. Right now, it just I give it, it should be a lead magnet, and I'm not using it properly, so I'm going to make some changes. But it's there, so go to the link in the bio, and you can take that quiz and find out. See you on Thursday. I'm jumping over to YouTube now to hang out with anybody who wants to go over there and listen to last Thursday's TikTok live with me. And also, please go get your tickets for Sandra Brown's webinar. It's super, super cool. I can't wait to see you guys on Thursday and hang out with you then. So you guys have a good week and be back here on Thursday with me. Bye-bye.